Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and excited to be here with you again today. And as always, we've got a great expert lined up to share some insights on some of the key things that you need to be aware of in your business and also the opportunities for you. And when I talk about opportunities, we're still in this phase where I think many businesses are still feeling disrupted. We're 4 years on from COVID or 5 years on from COVID, and we went through periods of great change, great upheaval, great uncertainty, and buzzwords like the new normal, pivoting, change management or having to cope with change came out. But the reality of it is we're still constantly being faced with change, changing legislation, changing conditions, changing supply. What is normal? Does normal actually exist? And I guess today is probably put a different spin on that whole concept and said that business is unusual and how do we manage that? So he's coming from a wealth of experience. So we're privileged to have Rick Yvanovich, the CEO of TRG International. Rick's a chief master coach, serial entrepreneur, an author and a speaker, and continues to focus on professionals but has some great advice for us business owners and leaders. And look, Rick, what are some of the key things that get you excited about speaking to business owners and leaders?
Yeah, great question. And first, thanks for having me on this podcast, Paul. And before I answer that question, I'd first like to quickly share a core belief that I hold dear, which might help reframe things. I believe that we all have this potential to be architects of change. And what I mean by that is, as you've introduced, we're in this era that is really defined by constant transformation. And the issue is that our task is not just to keep up, but we need to actively shape the path forward. Every day, our actions, whether they're big or small, they shape our future. And as we discuss this business as unusual topic today, Paul, I want everybody listening to remember this. You are your brand, and every single decision that you make is part of your unique story that you're crafting for yourself. How you react, how you adapt, and how you innovate in the face of all of this crazy change that we're facing will define your story and your legacy. It's this belief that each of us needs to aim for what I call balanced fulfillment. It's the cornerstone of my work. It's actually my life purpose. So as we dive into our conversation today, Paul, let's not just think about adapting to change, but how we can define it. After all, when we each embrace our unique qualities and strive for that personal growth, we're not just participants, but we're catalysts in our ever-changing business as unusual world. So let's get started, Paul.
Absolutely. Because I think we were talking about this before, that everybody was saying during this period of COVID, and look, the COVID period, we had that initial period of lockdowns and pandemics, and then we've had, I guess, a couple of years of recovery, and people are saying, like, when are we going to get back to normal? We're seeing business owners are requesting their staff to come back into the office. People are wanting to go back to what they consider normal, but you and I were talking before, and we were sort of agreeing that there is no such thing as a normal business. Business is not everyday, usual, the same. There are different constant changes, whether it be from legislation, economic, customers. Is it unrealistic to expect that we would have a normal business environment these days?
It's a great question. I mean, what's normal? I think, normal for me is unusual. That's why I use this phrase, business as unusual, and I even wrote a book under that name, because quite frankly, I was a bit fed up with people saying, when we get back to business as usual. Businesses, ever since the pandemic, hasn't gone back to the way it was, because the goalposts just keep moving. As you said, whether it's legislation or what's the current thing at the moment, should we return to the office? Should we not return to the office? Should we be hybrid? Should it be 1 day, 2 days, 3, 4, however many days? It's a great question, and I don't think there's any generic correct answer for everyone. Each business is unique, and each business needs to do what it needs to do. Some businesses have got rid of their offices, so it makes it a little bit hard to come back to the office in the first place. So to me, what's the new normal? The new normal is, there's nothing normal about it. It's the fact that we are going to be constantly bombarded by accelerating change. In the last 2 years, we've seen what generative AI has been doing, and that was a big shocker to the world. And just when people thought they might have grasped what that all means, we have some other advances in AI, which is causing even more shocks in the world. We've had changes in governments around the world, and we are yet to see what the new governments are going to do as far as global trade is concerned. So it just seems it's not stopping. And I guess why would we think it's going to stop? Why would we think it's going to slow down? I mean, with all the technological resources that we have available to ourselves, things just seem to be going faster and faster and faster. As global trade has grown, and as the world's gone pretty flat, and you're in Australia and I'm in Switzerland, we're on the other ends of the world, and here we are having a chat. This is pretty usual to do this, pretty normal, and so you can reach customers and prospects. It doesn't matter where they are on the planet. So it's all constant change, and it's terribly exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Look, there's a lot of people that I've spoke to in this period, and I also think back to 2008 with the global financial crisis, and we had similar concepts happening. I would speak to some business owners, and one would be saying, I'm waiting for things to correct. I'm waiting for the government to take action. I'm waiting for things to go back to normal. But the standouts would actually say, right, how can we take advantage of this situation? How can we create the best outcomes for ourselves and our business? What have we got to do? And we were talking before, and you mentioned that it's up to each individual business owner and leader to decide where they're going to go. They've got to take responsibility.
Yeah. When we're presented with a situation, we have to make a choice. Okay. It's really up to business leaders to make a choice. Okay. To look at all the options available and take action. So going back to what you were saying is, even before the pandemic, we've had a couple of financial crises, and one option was hey, let's wait until it blows over. Another option is, as we saw in some countries, but not everywhere, like during the pandemic, let's wait till the government bails us out and helps us. That's another choice. But I think the opportunity is to not wait. The handouts, aren't going to be there forever. And why are we waiting for a handout? Why aren't we acting? Why aren't we trying to work out ourselves how to move forward in the face of all of this disruption? There are opportunities out there. Look at it from another point of view. Well, isn't it good if lots of companies are doing nothing and they're waiting it means they're not moving. So what if you took action and actually moved? You can leave them all behind in the dust, as it were. Take advantage of the situation. There are always opportunities. And I guess there's a difference between some companies. I feel that some companies really, really thrive when there is disruption. Okay, whether things are accelerating or decelerating, of hyperinflation or no inflation, stagnation, there are companies that seem to just power through it and grow, and they're just going gangbusters, as it were, when there is that kind of disruption. There are other companies that do terribly with the disruption. Conversely, when things are smooth sailing, whenever that happens, if it ever happens anymore, again, there are some companies who do very, very well with that, and there are others who don't do well with that. So I feel there's no generic formula that one size fits all. It really, really does depend on the nature of your company, and it's really actually driven by the mindset, the attitude of the people running that organization. Okay. Personally, I'd rather take action in the face of any change rather than act like a deer in the headlights and just don't move.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, you've mentioned the book Business as Unusual, and the tagline there is how to thrive in the new renaissance. And I guess really it's what is the idea behind that is that as a business owner, you are in charge of the decisions you make and the outcomes that you're going to achieve. What are you suggesting are some of the key things? Like you mentioned, the mindset of the owner. What are the key drivers to actually be a thriving business in this unusual environment?
I think it's very important to be sort of resilient. Okay, to survive these things, it means we need to be a sustainable business. So we need to be able to not roll over and die when all these shocks hit us. So I'd say in the past, or maybe I'm an accountant by training, and I was schooled in, I don't know, it's always growth. Whenever I put a budget together for any company I work for, funny enough, it's always growth, isn't it? Growth. But in reality, you can't grow forever. Okay, and if we look at statistics, we actually look at longevity of companies. Well, a lot of companies don't make it even to 10 years. They don't even make it to double digits. And when we look at stock exchanges around the world, we see a lot of companies are disappearing off them. The speed at which they're disappearing and dying seems to be accelerating. So in this concept of business unusual, as far as a business leader is concerned, it's not actually about growth. It's about survival. Okay, survival sounds a bit horrible. So let's reframe it as being sustainable. And sustainable is not necessarily the ESG type of sustainability and being eco, but it's really the longevity of a company. There's a Japanese concept called Shinzen, I think. I probably murdered that word. And it's the concept of the longevity of companies. In Japan, there are about 30,000 of these companies, and they are hundreds of years old. Okay, they pass it on, they keep the business going from generation to generation. Okay, this is really, coming back from that craftsmanship and all of that kind of stuff. All of these secrets were passed on from generation to generation. So in the business as unusual world that I now see is that, hey, as business owners, we should be thinking about the longevity of our companies. Okay, how can we make sure that even after our tenure, it gets passed on to the next generation? Okay, that's not necessarily our kids, but the next group of people in the company. My own company, we celebrated 30 years last year. okay, I'm a baby boomer. My message to people was, hey, we're now hiring and we'll soon be mostly a Generation Z organization. That's the generation we're hiring now. And, it's great that we've survived 30 years. We've been sustainable for that. But what are we going to do in the next 30 years? Because in 30 years from now, we'll want you celebrating and deciding what you're going to do for the next 30 years. It's got to go on and on and on and on. And that type of long-term think is actually a little bit different from, hey, let's make a quick buck. Okay? And to me, it's very, very much linked to the mindset of people, because I believe the longevity of a company, if we get it right, is actually driven by the people. Okay, we need to look after the people. We need to grow the people, because after all, these are the people we're going to be handing it over to. So why wouldn't you do that? If it was a family-owned business, you would be, training up and passing it on to your kids and their kids. But in a non-familiar way, we're handing it on to the next custodians of the company.
So you're talking about the I guess the balance from pursuing quick financial gain to achieving that sustainable growth over the long term by investing in, I guess, the people that drive the company, and not just the current people, but the future people.
Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, as things change, knowledge changes, technology changes, what we know today becomes a bit redundant. Okay, so we got to be learning, keep on learning. So we have to grow ourselves, and we have to grow the individuals in our company. So we have the mindset, we have the tool set to be able to run the business and do what we need to do. So it is about knowledge, it's about gaining the knowledge, it's about the tools that we use. It is, as I said, and as you summarize, it is looking for the long term. One thing, it actually happened before the pandemic. If we can remember back, say, 10 years, and we were talking about the disruption going in the market by these sort of young upstart companies, people like Grab. Remember ride sharing when that first came in? And the Grabs and the Ubers, those companies popping up. That was a shock, a big shock. Okay, because nobody ever thought of that before, and they were completely disrupting industries. And maybe that was at the sort of the beginning of what was the Industrial Revolution 4, which has been around for 2 decades, and we were talking probably more about it only 10 years ago. And all of that change and disruption, I don't know if people have forgotten about it because we've been hit with yet another disruption with COVID, but it hasn't stopped. It's just getting faster and faster and faster. And even with these big, these disruptors coming into the market, there's a whole wave of them that comes in and disrupts the market, but not all of them survive. Okay? Maybe, some of them, because they're startups, they're going for that quick buck, that rapid growth, their hockey stick or whatever they're after, the huge exit, they're pursuing maybe profit. I personally don't ascribe to that. I prefer the longevity of the company, and providing the security to all the stakeholders.
Absolutely. So we're looking at that longer term growth, that sustainable process. So I guess really the key driver of that is the approach of the business owner, the business leaders, the mindset that they take. And for many business owners, they've come from that very much a survival mode, get through, survive, as you mentioned. But now we're looking at, well, how do we achieve, I guess, a great business, but having to adapt to unusual circumstances, or because there is no normal, constant change. what are the key things that we need to be focusing on to get that right?
I believe we need to remain curious. We need to continually challenge what we're doing. How can we make it better? Can we run more effectively? Can we run more efficiently? Just because we're doing well in markets A, B, and C doesn't mean we'll be doing well in markets A, B, and C forever. What are the threats? There've got to be some threats lurking around there. But more importantly, what are the opportunities? How can we, I think a lot of startups, and I do a lot of work with startups. I coach a lot of startups. Some of them can become overly reliant on a few customers. You find a handful of, that is that 80-20 rule. There's a handful of customers and they're a significant chunk of your business. Well, what if you lose them? All right. Now, I'm saying this from experience because in the last 30 years, I've made that mistake more than once. In fact, maybe 2 or 3 times. It's really sunk in now, And so, yeah, we put limits on any customer the moment it's of a certain size. We know we must raise the red flag and say, I know it's great business and we love them and we have the best relationship ever. But what if? What if? What if they get bought out by someone else? Oops. Or, anything can happen. So we really need to be aware of all the risks in our organization and not get too complacent. Not get too complacent.
Yeah, you mentioned being curious and challenging the way that you do things and thinking, what can change. And we're seeing a bit of a consistent theme coming through some of the conversations we've been having lately. When we're talking with Bruce Gleason from Jones Partners Insolvency and Turnaround, that whole idea of being overly dependent on one customer, one supplier, came up as one of the critical warning signs that your business could potentially be in trouble. And talking about this need to have a plan for how you're going to deal with that situation where something happens to that one customer or something happens to that supplier that you're relying on to supply all of your product. But I love the way you mentioned it, being curious about, what are the opportunities? What are the ways that we could do things differently? Because I think so many business owners who are clinging on to that idea of normal are still clinging on to the idea of, I like the way I used to do things. It worked well for me, and that's the way we're going to keep doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I to pick up on that point is, and it's even worse if that's been a business owner for a while and has seen good success, seen good profitability. Life's good, right? And we don't want to shake our own boat, but the golden goose isn't going to carry on laying golden eggs all the time, unfortunately. So as business owners, do we have people around us who are challenging us, who are willing to say no to some of our wacky and crazy ideas? Are we able to have that great debate at that senior level of, what our strategy should be and all the options that are available? Because there are always lots of options, but we can't do them all. We all have the constraints of time and money and other resources. So how do we make that choice? Are we, with the older organizations with a very entrenched sort of leadership, are we accidentally falling into sort of groupthink? Do we have a support mechanism outside the organization? Do we have independent directors? Do we have independent advisors? Do we have some non-executive directors that could help us, that are not so connected to the operation and the people, and can highly objectively, poke holes in what we're doing in a nice way, and remind us that, okay, maybe we are not going in the ideal direction.
Mm. So that seems to be like you're introducing this idea, or not introducing, but I guess stressing the importance of having some accountability as a business leader that's outside of your organization or outside your immediate decision making group. And for many business owners or many small, medium business owners, they don't actually have, I guess, a leadership team in house because many of them are running with very small teams. Um, how valuable is it to engage somebody outside the organization to be that accountability partner?
I think it's invaluable because at the end of the day, let's be honest, if you're an SME and you're the business owner, it's really lonely. It's really, really lonely at the top. And we're all faced with situations that come up, and it doesn't matter how good a team you have and how close you are in the team, there are just some things that you just can't discuss with them. And because if you are the business owner, well, you can't, that they're your employee, you can't have that ownership discussion with them. So who can you speak to? And it becomes a problem if you don't actually have someone to speak to. If you don't have a sounding board to, speak to someone who even appreciates the kind of pressure and the difficult choices you have to make, it can be a very, very lonely, very, very stressful journey. And it can lead into all sorts of complications if you can't discuss that with someone.
Absolutely, because it can be a very lonely life as a business owner. And as you've said, really important to get that accountability. But I guess also, when things are tough and you're not sure what the best way to go, having that external sounding board to actually help you work through objectively your options can be a big relief in terms of your own well-being and how I guess we talk about this idea of balance, but how separate you are from your business. The business doesn't become you. You can actually extract yourself from that and look at it more objectively. And I think we see a lot of stressed business owners because they're so intertwined with the business, and every decision is a stress on them.
And the challenge with that is, if you are your business and your business is you, as you get older and you are nearing retirement, whatever that is, getting older, and you just don't have the energy that you had when you were in your 20s, and you just got to slow down. Your body's saying, "Hey, slow down." How do you disengage yourself from your organization if you are your organization? Okay. I know this is going into a different topic. It's about personal branding. And again, it's going back to that longevity thing. How do you pass it on if you've intertwined yourself too tightly to the organization?
Yeah, great questions there, Rick. I'm feeling like we're only just touching the surface of some of these concepts here today. But the good news is you've gone into this in a lot more detail. You've actually written the book on it, and I'm covering a lot of the concepts that we've been, I guess, touching on today in a lot more detail, with a lot more guidance for business owners and business leaders. The book, how do we get a copy of the book if we're ready to make that next step?
Well, you can get it online. It's on Amazon. The other way to do it and find out more about it is visit my website. And my website is my name, Rick Yvanovich. And it's an unusual name because if you Google it, you'll find me because I'm the only person on the planet with that name.
That's a unique branding position, I guess.
Made it a bit easier.
Yes, absolutely.
But seriously, if you go to the website, there's all sorts of stuff about the book we've been talking about. There's Business as Unusual book, which is in English, or in Vietnamese if you really want to speak to it and read it in Vietnamese. And there's a whole load of resources on there if you go there. I read a lot, so I've got a lot of book recommendations, book lists that I have on there. And there are a whole bunch of freebies all over the site.
Fantastic. So we're going to share the links to, firstly, where to buy the book, but also the great resources that Rick's made available on his website, and encourage you to go and have a look because, as I've mentioned, we've only just touched the surface of some of these topics today, but they are covered in a lot more detail in the book, and I'm looking forward to delving into them in a lot more detail myself. So I'd encourage you to do the same. And look, if you know a business owner that could also benefit from this conversation and the ideas that we've been discussing today, please share this episode with them. Encourage them to not just listen to this episode, but to be a subscriber and listen to the Business Behind Your Business and many of the other conversations that we have designed to help you grow a great and prosperous business and achieve great things with not just your business, but also your life. And look, extremely grateful today to Rick Yvanovich for joining us and sharing some of his experience over many years, many years advising business owners and also with his own business experiences. And yeah, Rick, thank you very much for joining us on the Business Behind Your Business.
Paul, thank you so much. I really am grateful that you've allowed me to come onto your podcast today. It's been a really fun and fascinating conversation. And I hope all the listeners have really enjoyed it as much as I have. Now, let's not forget, this sort of final thought I want to leave people with is we're not just participants in this ever-changing world, but you're an architect. You're shaping the course of your life, your career, and the world around you. And I encourage everybody to embrace the change and try and define it rather than just adapt to it and react to it. Be the catalyst in your own business as unusual world. Look me up online, reach out to me, because the transformation really starts with you. And I want to hear about your journeys. And if we could have an opportunity to hearing about some of your journeys, learning from your experiences as well, and perhaps sharing some more in-depth future discussions. Thank you again, Paul, and to all our listeners. This was a great exchange. It was a wonderful podcast. Until next time.
Thanks again, Rick. We appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit and send in your burning questions because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.